So once again, it is Harvard University versus the Trump administration. CBS News can confirm that the oldest university in the United States could be out of an additional $100 million and very soon. So this development comes out of a letter that's expected to be delivered to federal agencies at some point today. And in it, the Trump administration's request to cancel all remaining federal contracts with Harvard University. So this is just the latest move in the showdown between the White House and Harvard. Since last month, the Trump administration has frozen about $3.2 billion in grants and contracts with the university. Just last week, the White House attempted to block Harvard's ability to enroll international students. So here are the president's words on social media about this. Mr. Trump saying, in part, we are still waiting for the foreign student list from Harvard so that we can determine, and these are Trump's words, how many radicalized lunatics, troublemakers, all should not be let back into our country, close quote. The president then adding, quote, the best thing Harvard has going for it is that they have shopped around and found the absolute best judge. Have no fear, the president writes, the government will in the end win. So a different kind of president, Harvard's President Garber, reacted. Listen.
In your lawsuit, the most recent of your lawsuits about this, you argue very quickly that this isn't really about international students, that it's an act of retaliation. What is really going on in your view?
In my view, the federal government is saying that we need to address anti-Semitism in particular, but it has raised other issues, including issues about speech, and it includes claims that we lack viewpoint diversity. There are also claims about failure to comply with laws concerning discrimination more generally. For some of this, we have been very clear that we think we do have issues, and I would particularly emphasize the speech issues. We think it's a real problem if, particularly at research universities, students don't feel free to speak their minds. When faculty feel that they have to think twice before they talk about the subjects that they're teaching. That's a real problem that we need to address.
Harvard's President Garber there on NPR this morning. CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro, you are on letter watch, as we say, as we wait to see what that letter says going out to those government agencies. What do we know about the contents and when it will go out?
Yeah, Reed, good to be with you. We know that that letter is going to primarily impact about 9 federal agencies who have 30 outstanding contracts with Harvard, totaling about $100 million. But that letter, according to a draft of it reviewed by CBS News, was sent to all federal agencies, I'm told, because they want agencies to essentially transition to new non-Harvard vendors for any work that they need going forward. An official described this letter as the federal government going out of business, end quote, with Harvard completely. An example of some of the contracts that could be impacted, according to one administration official, $50,000 for NIH to research effects of coffee drinking, $25,000 for DHS senior executive training. But I also took a look at some of the available information on the federal database. There was also about $23,000 from the Defense Department for health research and training, $15,000 for equipment maintenance from the CDC. Now, agencies can determine in what they send to the Trump administration on what contracts are, quote, critical, but the administration is still asking these agencies to transition away from that.
Well, Research University and Harvard's president said on NPR today that without that money, this research just won't go on. But really, we have to keep in mind, Harvard is not the only university that President Trump has zeroed in on and criticized. Is it thought there in Washington, D.C., that this is supposed to have a chilling effect by going after Harvard and send a message to other universities around the country?
Yeah, Harvard seems to be one of the first targets, but if you remember earlier in the year, there was this task force to combat anti-Semitism that included heads of the Education Department, HHS, the General Services Administration, that actually took a look and reviewed Columbia University when it comes to their practices on anti-Semitism, how they have handled a lot of the student protests since the October 7th attack in Israel. And they eventually came to an agreement with Columbia University on reviewing their admission procedures, adhering to all the administration's new student visa and immigration laws. So they came to an agreement, but certainly other colleges and universities could be next. next. The Harvard president was asked by NPR about this. Take a listen to what he had to say.
I wonder if you agree with that statement, that this episode is in fact a warning to all universities across the country.
Well, they said it, and I have to believe it. And I've repeated it myself. And that is how it's understood by the other leaders of other universities that I've spoken to. It is a warning. They see this as a message that if you don't comply with what we're demanding, these will be the consequences.
Now, in the May 13 statement from that Joint Task Force to Combat Anti-Semitism about the terminated grants for Harvard, they say they will, quote, not waver in its mission to root out discrimination, hate, and bigotry at institutions entrusted with public funds. So that signals Harvard is just the first, and that they'll be looking at all colleges and universities that receive federal funding.
Well, and they're going into another year and not very many months. They need that research money to continue doing the business of research universities. This will be fascinating. So, Aaron, let's put that battle aside and ask you about another showdown. This one is, of course, between the president and Russian President Vladimir Putin. A change of tone for sure. The president is out with another message for the leader there in Moscow. What did he have to say?
Yeah, President Trump posted on Truth Social saying, quote, what Vladimir Putin doesn't realize is that if it weren't for me, lots of really bad things would have already happened to Russia. He said, quote, he's playing with fire. This follows posts from President Trump over the weekend where he criticized Russian drone attacks in Ukraine, said that Vladimir Putin was, quote, absolutely crazy, said that the administration is considering further sanctions on Russia. In response, the Kremlin said yesterday that Trump's comments came during a moment of, quote, emotional overload as these negotiations for a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine continue.
Aaron Navarro reporting live from the White House. Thank you so much for keeping us up to date.